What's going on, everybody? It's EricRayweather back here with another Madden 20 video. In today's video, what I'm going to be doing is going over the 10 players who I feel were snubbed from being an X factor in Madden 20. Most of you know by now. If you don't, Madden has added abilities this year. They have players that are superstars, and they have players who are considered superstar X factors, which are the 50 best players in the league. These guys are just kind of a cut above the rest, and alongside their superstar abilities, they get a zone ability which allows them to really take over the game if they meet a certain criteria. Now, EA wanted to keep this to just 50 players because they didn't want to just give it out to everybody, obviously, because then it's not special, which I definitely agree with. But when you only give it to 50 players, just by default, you're going to have some pretty big names who were snubbed, and I tried my hardest to come up with the 10 players who I feel were the most snubbed from being an X factor. Now, the beta was out last month, so we kind of already knew who the X Factors were, but EA has since released the full list on their site and what their abilities are, and it's consistent with what the beta was. So, in this video, I'm going to go over my 10 guys. Now, before I get into these 10 first, I want to just mention both Tyreek Hill and Patrick Peterson, because they are not X Factors, but it's for a specific reason. So, to my knowledge, EA can't really further market or promote players who have, they have a suspension or something of that nature going on, or just like there's like an issue with them, right? So with Tyreek Hill, obviously we know about the off the field stuff. He's probably going to be suspended a few games, so he didn't get an X factor because of that. But at least in his case, he's still 99 speed, which is really, like, in my opinion, that's what makes him special anyway. So he's still special, even without abilities. And Patrick Peterson, obviously he went against the substance abuse program, whatever it's called in the NFL, obviously. Performance-enhancing drugs, he's going to be suspended for that. So he doesn't have an X factor either. So I'm not going to put those guys on my list because there's a very specific reason that those guys don't have it. If those issues weren't there, they would have the ability. So here are the 10 guys. So the number one guy that stuck out to me, without a doubt, was Jamal Adams. He is not an X factor player in the game, and I feel that he is the one on this list who should be one, and the most out of this list. Now, he does have a regular superstar ability, which is actually one of the better ones in my opinion. It's called Enforcer, which basically, he's going to lay hit sticks pretty much every time you go near him, and the hit sticks can't be broken out of. But what's really good about that ability is that even when the CPU is controlling him, if you get near him, he's going to lay you out, and it does cause more fumbles. But he doesn't have an X Factor zone ability, and I think he's a player that absolutely should. Now, the thing is, when I was looking at the list of the 50 X Factors on EA's site, I couldn't find 10 players that I would remove from that list. But there was maybe about 3 or 4 guys that I said, I would have Jamal Adams as an X Factor over these players. But he doesn't have one in the game this year, and I definitely think that was an oversight. The next guy for me is Malcolm Jenkins. Now, Malcolm Jenkins is a worse case because he doesn't have an X Factor, and according to the beta, he also didn't have a single superstar ability. He had nothing, and he is certainly still a top 5 safety in the game, and I believe I would be surprised if he wasn't a top 5 ranked safety, ratings-wise when the game comes out. So it's just a little odd to me that he didn't have any abilities in the beta, and he definitely doesn't have an X Factor according to EA's site. I think that's another oversight. He's definitely one of the more special players in the league, and he doesn't have anything. Number 3 on the list is Heyward, and he is another example of Malcolm Jenkins here in that he is not an X Factor, but he also in the beta didn't have a single superstar ability, which I think was pretty egregious. He should definitely have like one of the, most of the cornerbacks had abilities that were either like man up or zone out, which meant they were really good in man coverage or they were really good in zone coverage, or maybe it was pick artist where they can kind of, they don't really drop interceptions. When they get their hands on the ball, they secure it. Heyward should have one of those 3 things. Even if he's not an X Factor player, he should have an ability, and he didn't have any, which was really crazy to me considering just how good he's been the last couple years. Number 4 on the list is another one that really shocked me, and that is Lavonte David. And again, not only is he not an X Factor, but in the beta he had no regular abilities either, and I think that is just completely wild because he has been one of the best linebackers over the past 5 years. I mean, he's still, I would consider, one of the best linebackers in the league, and he has anchored that defense for a long time, and he just has no abilities. It feels like an oversight. Even if you didn't want to make him an X Factor, I think he should still have some type of ability. Whether it's just like the secure tackler ability or something like that, but he had nothing, and I just found that really, really shocking. Number 5 on the list is Keenan Allen. I believe that Keenan Allen is without a doubt a top 7 wide receiver in the league. Some would say top 5. For me, I feel like he's in that 5 to 7 range. I think in the 5 to 7 range, there's a handful of guys you can argue, and he definitely falls in that spot. Arguably the best route runner in the league, and he does not have an X factor. He's not an X factor player. Now, he did have a regular superstar ability, so he didn't go completely unnoticed. He did have an ability that gave him like better route running on certain types of routes. I forget which routes it was, but he definitely had something. But the fact that he's not in X factor, to me, the Chargers had a lot of X factors in the beta. I believe they had like 4 to 5 guys. I think they were one of the teams with the most. So maybe that's why they kind of had to like limit that and say, well, we can't just give all of their good players X factors. But the fact that Keenan Allen and both Casey Heyward didn't have them, it just kind of felt wrong to me, considering what they have done in the last few years of the league. Now, the next person on the list, I believe we're at number 6 now, is Davante Adams. He is not an X Factor player, but he did have some regular superstar abilities. I believe he had a couple, so he isn't the worst case on the list. He definitely is still recognized at being, elite in certain areas. But I feel that he did enough to be an X Factor player. Now, yes, last year was his first 1,000-yard season, so I get that. But he got 1,300 yards and I believe like 12 touchdowns, maybe 13 touchdowns. Had a really crazy year. And even though the last couple years he failed to get 1,000 yards, he still was like 12-plus touchdowns all of those years. He has been an absolute monster in terms of just finding the end zone, and I feel like that is something that makes you an X Factor player. He is a guy on that Packers team, obviously outside of Aaron Rodgers, he is the biggest threat on that offense. He is the guy you have to watch for, and teams just cannot seem to keep him out of the end zone no matter what. And last year, him being like the full-fledged number 1 guy for like truly the first time, we saw what he did, and I feel like he should be an X Factor. But, again, when we're getting further down this list, it's hard to find other guys to remove from the X Factor list. Because, like I said, outside of 3 to 4 guys, I don't really know who you would remove for guys like Davante Adams or Keenan Allen. It's really tough because there's so many good players in the league. Number 7 on the list is Deion Jones, one of the best linebackers in the league. Not an X Factor, and he also, I believe, didn't have any regular superstar abilities, which I thought was really wild because this guy should have something. I mean, he's one of the most athletic linebackers in the league. He's one of the best in the league, just period, at being a linebacker, and he had nothing, no tackling abilities, no like enforcer type abilities, nothing. And I think he should probably be an X Factor when you look at that team, when you look at that defense. Like there's a few good players on that defense. You got Grady Jarrett, you got Neal, you've got Trufant, but I feel like Jones would be considered maybe the best player on that defense. And again, one of the best in the league, and he has nothing, which was kind of wild to me. Number 8 on the list is Chris Jones of the Chiefs. One of the best interior linemen in the league. Just flat out one of those guys that's hard to block. I think he had like 15 sacks last year as an interior lineman, which is just very hard to do. I think he's just an underrated player in general. He doesn't get talked about as much, and I think part of that is because we're like in an era of so many great interior linemen. I mean, Aaron Donald is already a Hall of Famer. That's how good he is. Fletcher Cox is flat out amazing. You've got Geno Atkins, who's been so solid, over the past few years. You've got, Gerald McCoy is still very good. You've got other guys coming up like DeForest Buckner. And it's just like, there's a lot of good interior linemen, so I guess I get it. You can't give them to everybody. But Chris Jones was an absolute monster last year. And again, not only was he not an X Factor, but he didn't, to my knowledge, if I remember correctly, he didn't have any abilities. And he should definitely have something. For a guy that is that much of a problem to block, he needs to have something. Even if you don't want to give him an X Factor, he should have had, like the power move ability, or, just the ability to shed blocks quicker, because in real life, that's what he does. So that one I felt was a big miss. Keep in mind, some of these guys, they will get updated to have abilities. I know the regular abilities, they're definitely going to be updating that throughout the year and giving them to more players that don't have them at launch. The X Factors will stay at 50 players. Some will lose them, some will gain them. So some of these players here that don't have any abilities will get some, but I still think at launch, most of these players should have had something. Number 9 on the list is Stefon Diggs. Now, he's one of the better wide receivers in the league to me. I mean, he's a guy you argue as a top 10 guy, top 10 to 12 guy. Now, his other teammate wide receiver, Adam Thielen, he is an X factor. And I think most would agree that he's the better receiver of the two on the team. He's been the more consistent over the past couple years. But Diggs is an amazing route runner. Now, he did have a regular superstar ability, I believe, but I don't think it was anything to do with receiving. I think it was more of like a ball carrier thing. Like, he had, maybe it was like a juke ability or something like that, because he's really good in the open field, which is fine. But he's one of the best route runners in the league, and the fact that he's not an X factor, maybe I could live with that. But the fact that he didn't have any of the route running abilities that are in the game, because there's a lot of route running abilities in the game, right? There's some that give you better route running on crossing routes, some that give you better route running on post and corner routes, some that give you better route running on like ins and out routes. And the fact that he didn't have any of those despite being one of the best route runners kind of just seems off to me. He should have at least one of those abilities, and he should maybe even be considered an X factor. And the last person on this list is Kevin Byard of the Titans. He has been undoubtedly one of the best safeties in the league the last 2 years. He doesn't have an X factor ability, and he didn't have a superstar ability either, which I thought was crazy. The only person on the Titans that has an ability is Jarrell Casey. He has like a run stopping ability, I believe. But Byard has nothing, and you could argue that Byard's the best player on that team. It's between him and Jarrell Casey. It's very close. But Byard should have been recognized, I think, as an X factor. I truly believe that he has been an X factor on that defense the last 2 years. Like, he should be one of those guys that I'm trying to think of what the X factor abilities are for the safeties of his type, and I believe it's kind of I think it's an ability that kind of just, I'd have to look it up, but I forgot what it is. But it's an ability that allows you to kind of, when you get in the zone, you're going to really get, I think it's called Zone Hawk, and I think that Eddie Jackson and Earl Thomas have this, which allows you to kind of, you know, you get more knockouts and you get to the ball a little bit quicker when you're in the zone. I think he should have something like that, because that's what he's been the last few years. And even if he doesn't have an X factor, he should still have like the pick specialist ability that allows him to like have better catching on picks or something like that, because he's shown that he's that guy the last 2 years, and he didn't get recognized at all, which I thought was kind of wild. And that's it for my top 10. I think the only other honorable mention I kind of want to throw in there, maybe that they shouldn't have been X factors, but they should have had abilities, would be Brandon Cooks and David Johnson. I can understand them not being X factors completely, but they should have had abilities. Like, David Johnson should have had the backfield mismatch ability, because he's still one of the best receiving backs in the game, even though he had a down year. He's still a mismatch for linebackers and safeties. And Brandon Cooks should have maybe had something, because maybe not an X factor, but he is definitely a problem to cover. He's been one of the most consistent receivers over the past few years. He gets 1,000 yards with every team he's with. He gets a decent amount of touchdowns, you know, in that 5 to 7 range. He definitely is an explosive player, and he didn't really get recognized and have anything either, which I thought was a little off. But that's my list. I'll link below the EA blog below, or the link that has all of the abilities and which players have them. And, you know, let me know who you think got snubbed that you know, should have abilities as well. And as always, I will see you guys next time.